I think that this study, as with any serious study of the Bible, will be of a great benefit and a great blessing to us, and hopefully very enjoyable. The book of Philippians is a book of joy. It's a personal thank you, in one sense, from the Apostle Paul to the church of Philippi, and as a result of that, although Paul does deal with serious issues, and he deals with a problem or two, it's not at all like the Corinthian letter, not even like the Galatian letter that we just finished. That we finished, I guess about a year ago. And then the Ephesian letter, dealing with quite a few issues and problems in those congregations. You don't have that so much in the book of Philippians. And so it's a little different attitude, I think, you see from the Apostle Paul. Again, as a reminder, we'll talk about this quite a bit as we study together. Paul is in prison in Rome at this particular time, and he will allude to that throughout the writing in different ways. And that's really interesting because when you look at Paul's attitude of joy and rejoicing, you think that he probably had a lot of reasons not to rejoice, a lot of reasons not to be happy and to celebrate. And yet, that's exactly what he did. It makes us, I think, turn our attention to what really matters and what is truly important in life. Paul was right with God to the best of his ability, and he did not want the church to be discouraged. In fact, he wanted them to actually be encouraged as he dealt with these adverse situations, situations that were definitely negative and not good, and yet he dealt with them with faith and confidence, and you can almost see a smile on his face, I think, as he wrote this particular letter. So a powerful lesson, I think, for us there in reference just to the attitude of the writer, considering the circumstances that he was in. We pretty much dealt with the first verse or two last Sunday. Paul introducing himself as bondservant. He and Timothy basically was a volunteer. They volunteered to suffer. They volunteered to sacrifice. Volunteered to preach and teach the gospel. You and I are not going to be forced to be Christians. We're not going to be forced to be faithful. God doesn't want us that way. He wants us to be willing to volunteer, to study the Bible, to tell the gospel message to others. He wants us to be willing to visit and to encourage others, and to do that because we want to do that, because of what He has done for us and our response back to Him. Paul mentions particularly that the saints in Christ Jesus, and the word saints is from a word that simply means set aside, particularly for in religion for a special purpose. So all of us are saints in that sense. It's just another word rather than the word Christian or even the word disciple, which means a little bit more of a learner. So it would include all the Christians in Philippi, and it would include you and me today. He mentions the bishops and deacons, the eldership. Bishops are called elders, they're called presbyters, they're called bishops, they're also called shepherds. All of those words sort of designate a little bit of a different idea or thought. We normally refer to our leaders as elders, and because they are older and supposedly more experienced and hopefully more mature. Paul uses in verse 2 his normal greetings of grace and peace. You'll find that in a lot of his different letters. Grace simply has to do with favor that's not deserved. Peace has to do with the right relationship with God. We can only have peace with ourselves and with others after we develop a peace with God. So that comes by being a Christian and trying to be a faithful Christian. I also had a note that we talked a little bit last week in reference to the age of this church. It's probably 10, 11 years old since Paul was first there and established this particular congregation. Now is writing back to them. So we're down the road 10 or 11 years or so, and that plays into, I think, a little bit of the understanding of what he has to say. Anybody with a comment, question, or thought, anything from last week or your study or my rambling this morning? Okay. Again, one thing I encourage you to do, I hope that you thought about that, is to go back and read Acts chapter 16, particularly as far as the background to this particular study. As we noted with some of the letters, we don't have a great deal of knowledge about that particular congregation or what was taking place there. This is really not true with Philippi. We know quite a bit about it. And we know about the conversions that took place there as are recorded in Acts 16. So if you did not do that, I encourage you to go back and read that particular chapter. Verse 3, Philippians chapter 1, I thank my God upon every remembrance of you. Now that's really important. Acts 16, remember what happened there. Paul says, upon every remembrance of you. Why is that? Someone startled someone. What happened to Paul in Philippi? Well, he got put in jail. Why did he put in jail? Y'all asleep this morning?
He was brought out.
What?
He was brought out of jail too.
He was brought out of jail, yeah. But back up, Paul got beaten. Remember? They cast an evil spirit out of a young lady, and so they beat Paul and Silas with rods. And so, you would think they were bloody, they were beaten, that they were bruised. They ended up in prison, in the inner prison, so they got the chains, all those types of things. Paul, it's almost like it never happened. He don't remember the rods. They told lies about him. That's why he ended up in prison as well. He had done a good thing. They basically lied about that. So to say in every remembrance, it's almost like the beating didn't happen, the jail time didn't happen, the lies didn't happen. Paul had just sort of put that aside and could honestly say with every remembrance. Again, I think a lesson for us in reference to what we focus on. Paul was definitely focusing on those that have been baptized into Christ. He was focusing on the conversion of Lydia and others in her house, the jailer and other members of his family, rather than focusing on some of the things that seemingly brought that about. Verse 4, always in every prayer of mine making request for you all with joy. So the consistency of his prayer. One of the things that really comes out of these verses, I think, is that Paul made a special effort to take his mind off of himself and put it on others. And I think that that's one of the big challenges that we have. If we're not able to do that to some degree of success, it's likely that we will be controlled by selfishness, that we will be so self-centered that we're really not thinking about the hurts and the pains and the needs of others around us. Paul seemed almost to have been a master of that. Now, he's going to make some statements about himself in different letters in reference to the way that he was feeling. And he wasn't always so encouraging. There were times when he was down, when he was discouraged, and he mentions individuals like Onesimus and others that came in and really gave him a lift, gave him encouragement. But Paul, had his mind on others. Even the jailer, although the jailer obeyed the gospel, he is still the one that put Paul in that inner prison and was keeping him there. Paul had his mind on these others, and he was keeping them in his prayers. Prayer for enemies softens us up. I'm convinced, in my own experience and from my study of the Scriptures, that the best way for us to handle a problem with somebody that's hurt our feelings, somebody that has said something or done something that was discouraging, whatever it may be, somebody that spoke evil against us, somebody that's told a lie on you, whatever it may be. The best thing that you can do is start praying for that individual. And now, not praying that they'll go to hell for what they've done, but praying for their well-being. Pray for them that the attitude will change, that the circumstances will change. Paul was, again, a good example of one that remembered folks that had been abusive to him, that had been discouraging to him, and he remembered them consistently in his prayers. So, if there's somebody that you have a hard time getting along with, if there's somebody that has hurt you in one way or the other, healing and a proper attitude, I think, starts with remembering them in your prayers and doing that consistently. It's really hard to be mad at somebody that you pray for. Really difficult to do that. Anybody with a thought there?
Usually in that prayer, you ask the Lord to help you deal with that too.
Yes.
And if you're not sincere, then you really praying in vain.
Yeah.
Or your attitude and your heart's not right. You just say, Lord, help me deal with Steve Brown because he's done it wrong. But that's not really what I should be saying. It's that kind of attitude.
Yeah.
But if you're praying the right attitude and the right heart, then it's going to soften.
Yeah. And sometimes, the truth be known, I may be more the problem than the person I'm praying for. Lots of times with misunderstandings and that type of thing, it may have started with my attitude not being all that it should have been. So you're right. We're praying for ourselves. We're praying for the other person. And hopefully, all of us are aware of the seriousness of being honest with God. Nobody else is there. Nobody else is listening, and we're privately praying. And hopefully we're thinking about how we're sounding to God and how it's coming across to God. Good point. Anybody else?
He knows your heart.
He knows our hearts. In other words, we're honest and sincere with it, right? Yeah, exactly. I think it's interesting, too, that he uses the expression upon every remembrance of you. It's easy to forget. We need constant reminders. It's one of the reasons that it's so very important that we be here in Sunday school, that we be here for worship, is we need to constantly be reminded, even those of us that have been Christians for 30, 40, 50 years, we need to be reminded of God and God's goodness. We need to be reminded of our duties and our responsibilities. And so you'll find that idea throughout the Scriptures. It takes effort and it takes attention to really remember what matters and what's important and what we need to be thinking about. So Paul worked at remembering. And again, I think that's sort of one of the side blessings of prayer is as you're praying, you're thinking, okay, who do I need to pray for this morning? Who do I need to pray for this evening? Maybe who was mentioned in the announcements that's not feeling well. And again, maybe there is a problem of some sort with somebody. And we keep that in our prayers. So prayer helps us to remember. It's a good reminder. Anybody else with a thought there? Okay, notice in verse 4, always in every prayer of mine, making requests for you with all joy. So I think that, the fact that Paul was offering them up to God and requesting God's grace, he was requesting God's mercy, he was requesting God's forgiveness upon the Philippians. You've heard me say that one of the most humbling things to me is to have somebody mention me publicly in prayer. And because I know that if anybody needs it, I need it. But I think that when they got this particular letter, and for someone to stand up before the congregation and read this letter to the Philippian brethren, and to hear them read that, I thought that Paul is making requests for you. That's humbling. And it's very, very powerful. I think that we should let folks know. Let them know that we're praying for them. If there's sickness, if there's heartache, if there's trouble, that they're dealing with, to let them know that we are lifting them up in their prayers. And that's a request I get quite often from people that will come, asking for assistance or asking for food. Occasionally I get a phone call and folks will mention somebody that's sick or a death in the family and will ask me particularly to pray. I think that it's important that as Christians that we're willing to do that, and we can honestly assure them that we are doing that. Then maybe the next time you talk to them, the next time you see them, you can honestly say, hey, I've had you in my prayers. Again, it's a very, very powerful thing. Anything else there? Okay, verse 5. For your fellowship in the gospel from the first day till now. One of the things about a fellowship that maybe sometimes when we think of fellowship, many times we think about getting together. We think about eating meals together. We call that a fellowship. We will plan different activities to get groups together, the whole church together, where we can fellowship one with another. And that is a proper use of the word, but there's more to it as well, as it is used likely here, and maybe even back in Acts chapter 2. You remember some 3,000 folks were baptized in verse 41. And then verse 42, it says they continued steadfastly in the apostles' doctrine and in fellowship, breaking of bread and prayers. It likely had the idea of being able to participate in their giving. In fact, if you look over to chapter 4 in Philippians, and verse 14, Philippians 4:14, nevertheless, you've done well that you shared in my distress. And to you Philippians know also that in the beginning of the gospel, when I departed from Macedonia, no church shared with me concerning giving and receiving, but you only. For even in Thessalonica, you sent aid once and again for my necessities. So this idea of them participating in fellowship with the Apostle Paul likely has to do with their participation in sending money and sending support to him. And he notes that from the very first day till now, Paul doesn't say this about a lot. In fact, he will talk about the opposite. I guess they were in the first century a lot like we are today. There are those that are very liberal, and there are those that are very giving, and there's a whole lot of us that aren't. It may be that we just don't think about it. It may be that we don't realize the seriousness of our giving, of our contributions. But the Apostle Paul was very aware of this, and he was also very thankful that they were becoming partners with him, that they were participating with him in the preaching and the teaching of the gospel. And that's one of the ways that you and I preach and teach, is through the support of those that are actually doing the teaching. Whether we're talking about a missionary or whatever the particular activity may be. So it's a way that I can help. It's a way that I can be a part of it. And these folks had helped Paul maybe more than anybody else. And he made note of that, and he wanted them to know how thankful that he was. Anybody with the thought there?
The ESV uses the word partnership there.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty good in implying to us that we are partners, that we were partners working together to carry on the Lord's work.
Yeah, it is important, and it was a partnership. It was a fellowship. It was working together, and these folks had remained true from the very beginning. They had not faltered. They had consistently been a part of the good work that Paul was doing, and no doubt that was recognized by God as well, as you and I can participate, or as we can partner. Anybody else?
The New American Standard says participation.
Participation, yeah. All of it comes in there, those ideas, yeah. Good. And that's one thing where sometimes the different translations and comparing them can be of a benefit to us. As again, lots of times when we think about fellowship, at least this was the way when I was growing up, we always thought about it in reference to getting together. And eating a meal together and that type of thing. Well, that's there. But likely, particularly in this case especially, Paul had in mind more than that. He had this contribution, or participation and partnership. He had all that in mind. Okay? Verse 6, being confident of this very thing, that he who has begun a good work in you will complete it until the day of Jesus Christ. Interesting that he talks about a good work, the beginning of it, but also the fulfilling of it. Paul knew or felt that they would remain faithful. And as a part of that faithfulness, Paul knew that it was a wonderful thing to start, but it was an even better thing to finish. And encouraging us, I think, to recognize that as well. As Christians, we make our beginning by faith and repentance and baptism. But it's very vital that we understand the seriousness of continuing to participate and grow and develop. And there are different ways that we can do that. Through our Bible study, through visitation, through invitations to others. Many times we think maybe primarily a participation such as this, and this is very important. Our very presence it is important. Our contributions whether it is through a comment or whether it is through just encouraging other people, hugging somebody's neck, patting somebody on the back, on and on. All of these things all play together. And I guess I say that to say that, we're not converted just to occupy a pew. Although, that is important. I like occupied pews. I like a full house, and so it is encouraging to me, and no doubt that is encouraging to others. And there may be times when that's about the best we can do because of our health and circumstances. Occupying the pew is very important, but we must recognize that growth is vital. So to start is wonderful. To finish is even better. You remember in 2 Timothy 4, Paul, said, I fought the good fight. I finished the race. I kept the faith. And it always sort of sticks out to me when you read that passage to know that Paul was still keeping the faith. He was still fighting the fight. And he was still running that race until the day that he died. Even though he knew he was at the end, the time of his demise was at hand. Although we don't have a record of it, even when, Paul wrote this letter, he's getting, down towards the end of his life, and yet he's still going on. He's still fighting. He's still working. He's still striving to do better and to be better. Anybody with a thought there?
My greatest encouragement sometimes has come from folks that I know had a huge struggle just to give.
Yeah. Yes.
Some with EMS.
Yep.
Someone whose family was completely disturbed. And I knew she had an emotional struggle because I had a physical struggle. She was sitting in there.
This was powerful. If you're not hearing Eric in the back, he's talking about two individuals he knew. One that had a physical problem, the other had I guess, mental anguish. But to get there, you've heard me tell the story. I can't remember what country that it was in, but a lady was converted, and she was in constant pain. But on Sunday mornings, she would have to get on her hands and knees. They had about a dozen steps in front of the church building. She would crawl up those steps to get into the church building. And normally after being there on Sundays, she was pretty much in bed for a couple of days so that she could come back Wednesday night. That type of thing is powerful. I don't know how many of us we wouldn't be here. We had to crawl up the steps to get here, wouldn't we? We'd probably think that was embarrassing as well as more pain to us. And yet, there are folks out there that recognize and understand the importance for themselves and the power. That's a sermon in itself, isn't it? To see that kind of sermon. Sometimes that's maybe the best kind when people are really struggling to do what they can do the best of their ability. Anybody else?
I think that this kind of goes along with people who fast. When you fast for a few days at a time, you really start depending on God for the energy that you have or need to be able to get through a day. And, I know back in biblical days, they really fasted often. But, and then you look at somebody like the lady we were just talking about who's trying to make it to church. She's really depending on God to push her to church and be able to survive that another day. That shows you a lot of faith, a lot of confidence in God.
It does. Yeah. It's a powerful example, and the Apostle Paul, they knew where he was. They knew he was in prison. They knew the story 10, 11, 12 years before when Paul was there and was in jail, was beaten. So they were aware of that and the powerful influence that was there. No question about it. And for Paul to write them and to write them the way that he was doing, you'd almost think, and here Paul is, he's writing us, and he's praying for us, and he's uplifting us, and he's encouraging, and we're thinking, that's what we need to be doing for him. He needs someone that's in jail. He's the one that's been, lied about. He's the one that's going to lose his life, and yet it was just the opposite. So it just teaches us, I think, that regardless of our circumstances in life, I was reading something the other day, and this particular, no, it wasn't. It was Wednesday night. In his lesson, he talked about Brother Hillis talked about the person that was blind, and how that you go to see him and his wife and the kids, and they came away greatly encouraged. Well, I've experienced that too. Visiting a person that maybe was dying, or a person that couldn't even get out of bed, and you left being encouraged and lifted up. So that is always there, that option for us. Okay, verse 7. Just as it is right for me to think this of you all, because I have you in my heart, insomuch as both in my chains and in the defense and confirmation of the gospel, you all are partakers with me of grace. They likely felt his chains. They loved Paul. Paul was important to them, and their friendship and their fellowship. When you think back, Paul is thought may have been a part of the Sanhedrin court. We do know that he was a Pharisee, because he tells us that. We do know from his own words that he lets us know that he was more zealous than a lot of the other Pharisees. That's one of the reasons that Jesus appeared to him on the road. As someone pointed out earlier, God knows our hearts. And God knew Saul's heart. And knew that whatever he did, it was 150%. Even when he was wrong. And he stated, Acts 23, I think, that he always lived in all good conscience. Paul, even when he was dead wrong, was doing it with all of his heart. He was sincere there. So, Paul put everything into that. But when he made that change, when he was on the Damascus Road, he realized that he was persecuting the Lord. He went into the city, and Ananias preached to him. We know that he made that change. Wonder what happened to all Paul's associates and friends. I say he lost them all, wouldn't you? I mean, he lost them all. Likely family as well. Paul gave up everything, and he sort of started over. So the friendship that he's talking about here, I think, I have you in my heart. This was very important to Paul, to know that he was in their heart, and they were in his heart. And these folks were encouraging and supporting to the point that they were hurting because they knew where Paul was. And this was a special fellowship and relationship that he had with these brethren. And he wanted to encourage them even as they were encouraging him. Verse 8, for God is my witness, how greatly I long for you all with the affection of Jesus Christ. He loved these folks, and they loved him, and there was a great relationship back and forth. Anybody with a thought there? Okay, I think we'll probably stop right there. We'll take up with verse 9, hopefully next week. Appreciate your comments, particularly appreciate the participation. And again, if you've not been encouraging others to be here, try to do that. We can have others here that'll hopefully help us in our study. We can be encouraging to them as well. Thank you.